It was a warm August afternoon in the year 1901 when two respectable English women, Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, decided to visit the magnificent Palace of Versailles in France. Both were well-educated. Anne was the principal of Steady Hughes College in Oxford, and Eleanor her assistant. They were intelligent, not prone to fantasy or superstition. But what they experienced that day would defy every rational explanation and become one of the most haunting mysteries. They boarded a train from Paris and arrived at Versailles under a bright summer sky. The air smelled of roses and distant fountains. After touring the Grand Palace halls, they decided to explore the surrounding gardens, especially the Petit Trianon, a smaller estate once belonging to Queen Marie Antoinette herself. At first, everything seemed ordinary, but as they followed a shaded path lined with trees, the world around them began to change. The sunlight dimmed slightly, though no clouds covered the sky. The air felt thick, almost electric, as if a storm were about to break. Even the birds went silent. Anne later recalled that the entire atmosphere suddenly felt oppressive and unnatural. The laughter of tourists faded until there was only a strange humming stillness. Then, ahead on the path, they saw two men standing side by side. They were dressed in long green coats with brass buttons and old-fashioned tricorn hats, clothing that had been out of style for more than a century. Their expressions were stern, and they said nothing, only staring at the women as they passed. Anne and Eleanor assumed they were actors, perhaps part of a historical play. But something about the men's faces seemed off. A moment later, they noticed a small cottage that hadn't been on any map. The door hung open, and a woman stood motionless in the doorway, her face blank, her apron faded. Eleanor described her as having a strange, mechanical stillness, like a figure in a painting come to life. Suddenly, the women saw a man sitting on a small stone bridge ahead. He wore a large brimmed hat and a long cloak, and his face was wrong, gray, hollow, almost corpse-like. When he looked up at them, Anne felt a chill run through her entire body. The man silently raised his arm and pointed toward a nearby building. They followed his gesture, and there, near the Petit Trianon, they saw a woman sitting on the grass, quietly sketching. She wore a pale green gown, her hair powdered white, her face serene but sorrowful. Later, both women would swear they had seen Marie Antoinette herself, alive and sketching mere weeks before the fall of the French monarchy in 1789. Then everything changed. The air grew light again. The silence lifted. The distant laughter of tourists returned. The strange figures had vanished. The cottage and bridge were gone. Anne and Eleanor stood frozen, hearts pounding, realizing they had walked into another time and back again. What really happened in the gardens of Versailles that day?
When Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain returned to their hotel that evening, neither spoke for hours. Something about the gardens of Versailles felt wrong, as if they had crossed into a dream that wasn't their own. They hadn't told a soul what they'd seen, but both women felt the same chill, the same sense that something unnatural had taken place. Days later, they finally compared notes, and what they discovered shocked them. Their recollections matched exactly: the strange men in green coats, the lifeless woman by the cottage, the eerie silence, the man with the gray face, and the lady in the pale green gown sketching by the Trianon. Every detail was identical. At first, they tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it had been a historical reenactment. But when they asked Versailles officials about any scheduled events that day, they were met with confusion. There had been no costumed actors, no performances, and no special tours. Nothing at all. Even stranger, when they tried to retrace their steps the following week, the paths they remembered no longer existed. The small bridge they crossed was gone, and the cottage had vanished entirely. When they examined 18th century maps of Versailles, they found something extraordinary. The route they had taken matched a layout of the gardens that had been changed decades earlier. Somehow, they had walked paths that no longer existed in 1901. The two women began documenting every memory, sketching maps, and listing every sound and sight from that day. As they compared their findings, more strange coincidences emerged. The style of dress they described for the men, long green coats with three-cornered hats, was accurate for palace guards in the 1770s. The woman's gown and hairstyle matched portraits of Marie Antoinette painted in 1789, just months before her arrest. Anne and Eleanor could no longer dismiss what had happened. They believed that for a brief, terrifying moment, they had stood in the year 1789. Still, they hesitated to tell anyone. They were educated women, leaders in academia. To speak openly about time travel or ghosts could destroy their reputations. So for months, they stayed silent. They suffered nightmares, waking to the image of the pale man on the bridge or the sound of unseen footsteps behind them. Finally, after nearly a year of research, they decided to reveal their story, but cautiously. They published a book in 1911 titled An Adventure, using false names to protect themselves. In it, they carefully described every moment of their experience, offering maps, clothing details, and eyewitness testimony. To their surprise, the book became a sensation. Some called them visionaries. Skeptics scoffed, but the evidence, the accuracy of their details, their matching testimony was impossible to ignore. For Anne and Eleanor, the goal was never fame. It was truth. Something had happened that August day in 1901. But what was it? Had they really walked through a doorway in time? As news of the Versailles Time Slip spread, investigators from across Europe tried to explain the event with logic and science. How could two respected women, educated, rational, and not known for fantasy, both witness the same impossible vision? Some claimed they had stumbled into a historical reenactment, though none had ever been scheduled at Versailles in 1901. Others said it was a mirage caused by intense sunlight reflecting through layers of mist, distorting time and vision. But that afternoon had been clear, no fog, no haze, no reason for optical tricks. Skeptics insisted it was hysteria or exhaustion, that the women had unconsciously built the vision together through suggestion. Yet their notes told another story. They had written their experiences separately, and the details matched almost perfectly, down to the color of a sash, the style of a wig, and the sound of distant music playing on instruments no longer used. One witness even described hearing faint laughter and the rustle of silk dresses behind the hedges, sounds that stopped the moment she turned around. Decades later, physicists revisited the story with a different lens. Some wondered if the women had slipped through a fold in time, a phenomenon where moments overlap like ripples on water. Under rare conditions, electromagnetic energy might distort perception or even bridge two eras temporarily. Parapsychologists had their own theory, that certain places hold emotional imprints, like a recording of the past replaying itself. And if anywhere would be haunted by the weight of history, it would be Versailles, the site of royal extravagance, revolution, and bloodshed. Still others believed something more spiritual was at play. Maybe the women had been chosen, drawn to that moment for a reason. Maybe the restless spirit of Marie Antoinette herself reached out across time, desperate to be seen, remembered, and mourned by someone who would understand her sorrow. To this day, the Moberly-Jourdain incident remains one of the most credible and unsettling time slip reports ever documented. And though science has offered theories, none have been able to fully explain how two ordinary women stepped out of 1901 and into 1789. Today, the gardens of Versailles appear timeless, sunlight dancing across the fountains, tourists laughing near marble statues, and the scent of roses drifting through the air. Yet if you wander near the Petit Trianon at dusk, when shadows stretch long over the lawns, the world can feel strangely still, as if the past is holding its breath. Many visitors have reported that same eerie silence Moberly and Jourdain described. Birds stop singing, the wind dies, and the air feels thick, charged, almost humming. Some claim to hear faint whispers in French, the creak of carriage wheels, or the echo of a harpsichord playing from nowhere. In 1955, a historian walking those same paths swore he saw a woman in an antique gown near the grove. She looked at him, startled, and then vanished behind a tree that hadn't existed for centuries. Could it be that Versailles is one of those rare places where time bends, a thin place where history and the present overlap like translucent film? Some believe the palace itself acts as a vessel for memory, trapping the energy of every event that ever happened there, love, betrayal, and the terror of the revolution. The spot where Anne and Eleanor met the mysterious woman in green is still marked on maps today. Some say her ghost appears only to women. Others whisper that those who linger too long in that garden feel a pull, a dizzying sensation that time is about to fold again. Whether it was a scientific anomaly, a psychic replay, or a haunting, one truth remains: the experience changed both women forever. Neither of them sought fame or fortune. They only wanted to understand the impossible. As in Moberly once wrote, "I believe we walked across the border of time, and time led us through." Perhaps the past never truly disappears. It lingers, waiting for the right moment, or the right soul, to see it. So if you ever walk the gardens of Versailles and the air suddenly grows still, the sunlight fades, and silence falls like a curtain, don't be afraid. Just listen. You might be hearing the whispers of 1789, and the ghosts of those who still remember.